That day started out completely normal. Lunch was ready, my husband left in a hurry saying he was going to our son's school meeting, and I stayed home, trusting every word he said. But what I didn't know was that while I waited for him to return with news from the meeting, I would uncover something that would completely change the way I saw the man I shared my life with. My name is Helena, and I've always believed that trust is the foundation of any marriage. I'd been married for 12 years and used to proudly say that my husband, Ricardo, was a devoted man both to his work and to his family. So when he told me he was going to our son's school meeting, I had no reason to doubt him. That afternoon, he put on a blue dress shirt, the one he usually wore for important occasions, and left with the car, just like always. I stayed home, organizing clothes in the closet and thinking about preparing something special for dinner. Everything was perfectly ordinary until I stumbled upon something that made my heart skip a beat. While looking for our son's report card, I found a small folded note tucked inside one of the folders. The handwriting was delicate, clearly not his. It read, "See you later, same place as always." My heart started racing. At first, I tried to convince myself it was something old or meaningless. But then I saw the date written in the corner, the exact same day he said he had that school meeting. I froze. A heavy feeling formed in my stomach. The clock said 3:40 p.m., and I knew the meeting was supposed to end around 4:30. Something inside me whispered that I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. I grabbed my purse, got in the car, and drove out, following an instinct I couldn't ignore. What I saw that afternoon was the beginning of the end of everything I believed about my marriage. As I drove through the quiet streets of our neighborhood, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. I kept telling myself that maybe I was overreacting, that maybe Ricardo truly was at the school, sitting among other parents, talking about grades and class projects. But deep down, something in my chest told me I was about to face a truth I wasn't ready for. The school was only 15 minutes away, but when I parked outside, his car wasn't there. My heart began to race even faster. I checked the parking lot twice, my eyes scanning every vehicle, but no sign of his black sedan. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the entrance of the school, trying to process what that meant. I decided to call him. The phone rang, once, twice, then he answered. "Hey, love," he said, his voice calm. "I'm still in the meeting, it's taking a bit longer than expected. I'll be home soon." The lie slid so easily off his tongue that I felt a chill run down my spine. I looked around the parking lot one last time before hanging up. My instincts were screaming now, he wasn't there. I started driving aimlessly at first, not even sure where to go. Then I remembered the note, "Same place as always." Those words kept echoing in my head. I knew there was only one place that made sense, the small cafe near the park. The one he used to mention years ago when he said he went there to relax after work. When I arrived, I parked a little further away, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Through the glass window of the cafe, I saw him, Ricardo, my husband, sitting at a corner table, and he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him. She had long brown hair and wore a red dress. They were sitting close, laughing in a way that felt far too familiar, the same laugh he once shared with me when we first fell in love. I couldn't move for a moment. My throat went dry, and my hands felt numb. He reached across the table and touched her hand. That simple gesture was like a knife twisting inside me. I wanted to burst through the door, to scream, to demand an explanation, but I didn't. Instead, I stayed there, hidden behind the half-open window of my car, watching my marriage crumble in silence. After a few minutes, they stood up. He placed his hand gently on her back as they walked out together. I ducked down, my breath shaky. I watched them cross the street and stop beside his car, the same car he had left home with to supposedly attend our son's school meeting. She got in first. Then he looked around, cautious, as if making sure no one saw them, before getting in too. They drove off, and I sat there frozen, tears blurring my vision. It felt like the world had stopped moving. All those years of loyalty, of shared dreams, of sacrifices, suddenly felt like nothing but a well-constructed lie. I don't remember how long I stayed there. When I finally managed to start the car, I didn't go home. I drove to the park instead, parked under a tree, and let myself cry until I couldn't breathe. But as the sun began to set, something inside me changed. The pain slowly gave way to a strange calm, and a quiet decision formed in my mind. If Ricardo wanted to live a double life, he was about to learn that his lies had consequences far beyond what he could imagine. I drove home that evening in complete silence. The city lights blurred through my tears, and every red light felt like a cruel reminder that I was being forced to stop and face a truth I never wanted to see. When I finally parked the car in front of our house, everything looked exactly the same: peaceful, ordinary, almost mocking me. The garden lights were on, the curtains slightly open, our son's bike still leaning against the porch. But I knew nothing was the same anymore. I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the front door, trying to figure out what to do. I could confront him. I could scream, break things, demand the truth he was so desperately trying to hide. But something stopped me. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the quiet voice inside me that whispered, "Don't act now. Wait, watch, think." When Ricardo came home an hour later, I was in the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes. He walked in smiling, like nothing had happened. "Hey, honey," he said casually, placing his keys on the counter. "The meeting went really well. The teacher said Lucas is improving in math." For a moment, I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how ridiculous his performance was. He kissed me on the cheek, and I felt my skin crawl. That kiss, that same mouth that had lied so easily. I managed to smile weakly, forcing my voice to sound normal. "That's great, love. I'm glad to hear that." He had no idea that I already knew. That night, while he showered, I sat on the edge of our bed staring at his phone on the nightstand. My heart raced. I'd never checked his phone before. I believed that trust was sacred. But now, that trust was already dead. My hands were shaking as I unlocked it. I didn't even need a password. He never thought I'd dare look. The truth was all there in plain sight. Messages. Dozens of them. Her name was Clara. "I miss you already. When can we see each other again? I can't stop thinking about you." Each word burned like acid on my skin. The oldest message was from almost 6 months ago. That meant he'd been lying to me for half a year, maybe longer. He had built 2 lives and managed to keep them perfectly balanced, as if my love, our family, meant nothing. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, to wake him up and show him everything I'd seen. But again, that same quiet voice stopped me. "No," it whispered, "not yet. Let him think you don't know. That's when you'll have the power." The next morning, I woke up before him. I made breakfast, packed our son's lunch, and smiled like everything was normal. But behind that smile, my mind was already working, planning. I wasn't going to let him destroy me quietly. Over the next few days, I gathered everything: the screenshots of the messages, the photos, even the bank statements. He had been spending money I didn't recognize: hotel bookings, restaurant dinners, even gifts. Each new piece of evidence was another knife to the heart, but I kept going. I needed to know everything. Clara wasn't just anyone. She worked at his office, someone I had met once, briefly, at a company event. I remembered how she smiled at him that night, how I brushed it off as harmless. If only I had trusted my instincts then. By the end of the week, I knew more about their relationship than he could imagine. Where they met, how often, what excuses he used. But what he didn't know was that I had already made my own plan. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry in front of him again. No, I would wait for the perfect moment. The moment when his lies would collapse in front of everyone. And that moment was closer than he thought. For the next few days, I became an actress in my own home. Every smile, every casual conversation, every kiss on the cheek, it was all part of my performance. Ricardo believed everything was fine, that I was still the loving, trusting wife he could lie to without consequence. He had no idea that I was quietly collecting pieces of his deception, preparing for the day I would expose him completely. During breakfast, he would talk about work, about deadlines, about stress at the office, and I'd nod, pretending to listen. But inside, every word made my anger grow colder, more focused. I didn't want revenge out of rage. I wanted justice. And justice, I realized, had to be precise. I started studying his patterns. He always left home around the same time, claimed to work late twice a week, and his business meetings always seemed to happen on Thursdays. I already knew Thursday was when he met her. That morning, I followed him again. This time, I was ready. I parked far enough so he wouldn't notice me and watched as he entered a small boutique hotel on the other side of town. I took pictures, his car, the entrance, the exact time. 10 minutes later, Clara arrived. She was wearing a white dress and carried a small gift bag. I felt a wave of nausea rise inside me, but I kept my composure. I waited. 2 hours passed. My hands were cold, my chest tight, but I didn't move. When they finally came out, laughing and holding hands, I took one last photo, the one that would change everything. That night, when Ricardo came home, he kissed me like nothing was wrong. He even brought flowers. I smiled, thanked him, and placed them in a vase on the dining table, the same table where he used to tell me he loved me. Rough day? I asked softly. You have no idea, he sighed, loosening his tie. Meetings, reports, the usual. I nodded, pretending to believe him. Inside, I was already thinking about what would happen next, the plan I had spent all week preparing. The next day was Saturday. We had been invited to a small family dinner at my sister's house. Ricardo hated those gatherings, but this time, I insisted we go. He reluctantly agreed, unaware that I had already invited someone else. Clara. Yes, Clara. I had found her number in his phone and texted her using a private account, pretending to be a colleague organizing a surprise dinner for Ricardo's birthday. I told her it was meant to be a secret, that everyone from the office was coming. I made it sound perfectly believable. She agreed without hesitation. That evening, everything was ready. My sister, who knew nothing yet, had prepared dinner as usual. Family, laughter, wine, the perfect cover. Ricardo arrived with me, smiling, holding my hand as if we were the picture of a happy couple. Then, 15 minutes later, Clara walked in. The room went silent. Ricardo froze, his hand slipping from mine. Clara's eyes widened when she saw him, her face turning pale. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then I stood up slowly, my heart pounding, and smiled. Oh, Clara, so glad you could make it, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Ricardo didn't mention you'd be here tonight. She stuttered, trying to explain. Ricardo's face turned red, his jaw tightening. Everyone around the table looked confused, my sister, my parents, even our son, who was sitting quietly in the living room. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. Actually, I continued, there's something I think everyone should see. One by one, I showed the photos, the messages, the receipts, the pictures of them leaving the hotel. The silence in the room was deafening. Ricardo tried to speak, to deny it, but the evidence was undeniable. Helena, please, he began, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Save your lies for someone who still believes them, I said coldly. Clara grabbed her purse and rushed out of the house, her face burning with shame. Ricardo stood there, humiliated, surrounded by the family he had deceived. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply said, you wanted a double life, Ricardo. Now you can have it, but not with me. Then I turned around, walked out the door, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Later that night, as I sat alone in the car, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, but there was a strange peace in them, the kind that comes when you finally stop pretending. That was the night I promised myself something. I would never again allow someone to make me feel small for loving too much. He destroyed my trust, but he also awakened my strength. And from that moment on, I knew I wasn't the same Helena anymore. That night, after everything collapsed, I drove without direction for almost an hour. The city lights blurred past like streaks of color, and my mind replayed the scene over and over. Ricardo's shocked face, Clara's trembling hands, the silence that followed after I exposed them. It should have felt like victory. I had revealed the truth. Everyone knew. The liar had been unmasked. But as I sat alone in the darkness of my car, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like grief. I had spent 12 years building a life with a man who turned out to be a stranger. The memories, the laughter, the plans for the future, all of it now felt like pieces of a story that had ended long before I realized it. When I finally got home that night, I didn't go to our bedroom. I couldn't. I slept on the couch, still wearing my dress from the dinner, staring at the ceiling until dawn. I could smell his cologne on the pillows, hear the echoes of our past in every corner of that house. It was unbearable. The next morning, I woke up to silence, and for a moment, I thought maybe it had all been a dream. But then I saw the empty space on the nightstand where his phone usually charged, the drawer half open, and the faint smell of his perfume still hanging in the air. He was gone. He had packed a few things and left sometime during the night. No note, no message, nothing. I thought I would break down again. But instead, I just sat there numb, exhausted, but strangely calm. Because deep inside, I knew something he didn't. I had already taken back control. Over the next few weeks, I focused on rebuilding my life piece by piece. I changed the locks, cancelled our joint accounts, met with a lawyer, and started therapy. It was painful facing everything, admitting that I had lost not just a husband but also the person I thought I was. But little by little, I began to heal. At first, the silence in the house felt suffocating. Then, slowly, it started to feel peaceful. My mornings became mine again. I would wake up early, make coffee, and sit by the window watching the sunrise, something I hadn't done in years. My son, Lucas, asked questions at first. "Mom, is Dad coming back?" I took a deep breath before answering. "I don't know, sweetheart. But even if he doesn't, we're going to be okay." And I meant it. Weeks turned into months, and just when I thought Ricardo had disappeared completely, he showed up at my door one afternoon. He looked different, tired, older, defeated. He held a bouquet of flowers in one hand and an envelope in the other. "Helena," he said softly, "can we talk?" Every part of me wanted to slam the door in his face. But curiosity, or maybe closure, made me step aside. He sat on the couch where I had cried the night everything fell apart. His eyes were filled with guilt. "I made a mistake," he said. "The biggest mistake of my life. Clara's gone. She left me. I want my family back." For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered every night I cried alone, every lie he told, every time he chose someone else over me. "I'm sorry, Ricardo," I said quietly, "but that family you're talking about, it doesn't exist anymore." He looked at me, desperate. "Helena, I still love you." I smiled sadly. "No. You love the version of me who didn't know who you really were. That woman's gone." He tried to say something else, but I stopped him. "You destroyed my trust. You can't rebuild love on top of ruins." He lowered his head, silent. Then he placed the envelope on the table and walked out. I never saw him again. Inside the envelope was a letter. He wrote about regret, guilt, and all the things he wished he had done differently. But I didn't finish reading it. I didn't need to. The past no longer had power over me. I burned the letter in the sink, watching the paper curl into ashes, symbolic, final. And that night, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. Months later, I realized something beautiful. I wasn't broken. I was transformed. I had faced betrayal and loss, but in the process, I found something far more valuable than love. I found myself. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. I reconnected with old friends, traveled with my son, and began to laugh, genuinely laugh, without fear or sadness behind it. One afternoon, while walking in the park, Lucas pointed at the sky and said, "Mom, look, it's like the clouds are smiling." I smiled back at him and said, "Maybe they are, sweetheart. Maybe they're finally free too." And at that moment, I realized I wasn't the woman who cried in the dark anymore. I was the woman who had survived, who had risen, who had learned that sometimes losing someone is exactly how you find yourself again. Months passed, and the pain that once consumed me began to fade into something softer, a scar that no longer hurt but reminded me of how far I had come. My life had changed completely. The silence that used to suffocate me had turned into peace. The loneliness that once broke me had become my freedom. It wasn't easy. Healing never is. There were nights when the memories returned like ghosts, the laughter, the dinners, the lies. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and still reach for the empty space beside me. But instead of crying, I'd smile sadly, whispering to myself, "You're okay now." I had built a new routine. Mornings started with coffee on the balcony, watching the sunrise while Lucas got ready for school. I'd drive him there, kiss his forehead, and remind him to do his best, the same words Ricardo once said, but now they came from a place of strength, not habit. After dropping Lucas off, I'd go to the small art studio I had rented in town. Painting became my therapy, my escape, and eventually, my rebirth. I painted everything: moments of grief, joy, betrayal, freedom. Each color on the canvas told a story I couldn't put into words. People began to notice. One of my paintings was displayed at a local gallery, and to my surprise, it sold on the first night. The woman who bought it told me, "There's pain in your art, but there's also light." I smiled, realizing she had seen exactly what I felt. I started teaching small art workshops for women who, like me, had lost themselves in toxic love, betrayal, or years of silence. We painted, we cried, we healed together. It was in those moments, surrounded by others who had been broken and rebuilt themselves, that I truly understood something. Strength isn't born from perfection, it's born from surviving what was meant to destroy you. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. I was setting up for a class when a man walked in, holding a brochure from the gallery. He looked to be in his early 40s, tall, with kind eyes and a quiet, confident energy. "Hi," he said, smiling softly. "I saw your painting at the exhibit. It stayed with me. I wanted to meet the person behind it." For a moment, I froze. I wasn't used to attention, not anymore. But there was something different about his tone. There was no pressure, no charm, no pretense. Just sincerity. "Thank you," I replied, feeling unexpectedly shy. "That painting came from a very personal place." He nodded. "That's why it's beautiful. Real things always are." His name was Daniel, a photographer who had recently moved to town after losing his wife 2 years earlier. He spoke gently, with a calm that felt familiar, almost comforting. Over the next few weeks, he started attending the workshops, not as a student but as a quiet helper. He'd bring coffee, adjust the lighting for photos, sometimes stay after class just to talk. At first, I kept my distance. I wasn't ready for anyone new. My heart had learned the hard way how dangerous it was to trust. But Daniel never pushed. He respected my silence, my space, my pace. One afternoon, as I was cleaning brushes, he looked at me and said, "You know, you smile differently when you paint. It's not the same smile you give people, it's real." I paused, the brush still in my hand. "Maybe that's because painting never lied to me," I said softly. He smiled back, not saying anything, just understanding. That quiet understanding became the foundation of something unexpected. Weeks turned into months, and Daniel became part of my world slowly, naturally. He met Lucas, who liked him instantly. They bonded over soccer, and I'd often find them laughing in the living room while I cooked. For the first time in years, the house felt alive again, not because of Ricardo's return, he never came back, but because love had returned in a different form, gentle, patient, honest. One evening, after Lucas went to bed, Daniel and I sat on the porch, watching the stars. There was a long, peaceful silence before he spoke. "Helena, do you ever think about the past?" I sighed. "Sometimes, but it doesn't hurt like it used to. I think the past is just a teacher. A cruel one, maybe, but necessary." He nodded. "I think so too." I turned to him and smiled. "You know, I used to think that what happened to me was the end of my story. But now I see it wasn't an ending, it was the middle. The part where I finally learned who I am." Daniel reached for my hand. "And who are you, Helena?" I looked up at the night sky, the stars reflecting in my eyes, and whispered, "I'm someone who survived. Someone who stopped waiting to be saved and learned to save herself." That night, when he kissed me, soft, patient, real, it didn't feel like starting over. It felt like coming home to myself. Months later, I stood in front of a crowd at my first solo art exhibition. My paintings hung across the room, each one telling a piece of my story: love, betrayal, loss, rebirth. I titled the collection What I Discovered. As people admired the artwork, Daniel and Lucas stood by my side. I looked at them and realized that life had come full circle. The pain that once shattered me had become the light that guided me. And when a reporter asked what inspired my work, I smiled and said, "Once, I thought my world had ended, but sometimes, endings are just beginnings in disguise." The night of my first solo exhibition was one of the most meaningful nights of my life. I remember standing in that bright room, surrounded by people, art, laughter, yet feeling something much deeper than pride. I felt whole. Each painting on the wall told a story I once thought I'd never survive. My pain, my betrayal, my heartbreak, all of it was there, immortalized in color and texture. But instead of sadness, the gallery radiated warmth. Because my story, though born from darkness, had turned into something beautiful. As I moved through the crowd, people came up to me, strangers, mostly women, and whispered, "Your art spoke to me. I've lived this." Some cried, others hugged me, and for the first time, I understood what healing really meant, not forgetting, but transforming. After the exhibition, Daniel, Lucas, and I went out for dinner to celebrate. It wasn't fancy, just a small restaurant near the river. We laughed, we reminisced, and as I watched my son talk about his school projects with excitement, I realized that life had gently returned to me, not all at once, but piece by piece. Yet, life has a strange way of testing you even after you've healed. 1 week later, while I was closing the studio for the day, I heard a voice behind me. "Helena." I froze. It had been nearly a year since I'd last heard that voice, but I would recognize it anywhere. "Ricardo." I turned around slowly. He looked different, thinner, worn out, with dark circles under his eyes. His once confident posture was gone. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, holding a small envelope in his hand. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to say no. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, made me nod. 5 minutes, I said firmly. He stepped inside, glancing around the studio. His eyes stopped on one of my paintings, the one that showed a woman standing in the rain, looking at a shattered reflection of herself. "You painted this," he said softly. "Yes," I replied. "It's called After the Storm." He nodded, his expression filled with regret. "You've changed," he whispered. I met his gaze and said, "No, Ricardo, I didn't change. I just stopped breaking myself to keep someone else whole." He lowered his head. "I deserve that." For a moment, we stood there in silence. Then he took a deep breath and handed me the envelope. "I just wanted to give you this," he said. "It's the divorce papers. I signed everything. You can move on freely now." I took the envelope without a word. He continued, his voice shaking. "I've lost everything, Helena. Clara left. The company let me go. I tried to fix things, but nothing worked. I keep thinking about what I did to you, to our family. I know it's too late to ask for forgiveness, but I needed to say it anyway." For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pain either. I just felt peace. "Ricardo," I said gently, "you're right. It is too late to fix what you broke. But I don't hate you anymore." He looked up, surprised. "I forgive you," I said simply. "Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." Tears welled in his eyes. "You really mean that?" "Yes," I nodded. "Forgiveness isn't about you. It's about letting go of what hurt me." He nodded slowly, silent, then said, "You've become someone incredible, Helena. I wish I had seen that before." I gave a small smile. "You didn't have to see it." I did. And with that, I turned and opened the studio door. "Goodbye, Ricardo." He walked out into the fading evening light, his figure disappearing down the street. I stood there for a while, listening to the sound of the same city where my heart had once been shattered, and now, where it had been reborn. That night, when I told Daniel what happened, he simply took my hand and said, "Now you're really free." He was right. From that day forward, I felt lighter. The past no longer followed me. It became something I could look back on with gratitude, not for what I lost, but for what I gained: strength, clarity, and self-respect. A few months later, I held another exhibition, this time called Becoming. It wasn't just about pain anymore. It was about growth, joy, and the quiet magic of starting over. Daniel helped me set everything up, and Lucas proudly told everyone, "That's my mom's art." During the opening speech, I looked out at the audience, faces full of curiosity, empathy, and admiration, and said, "I used to think my story was about betrayal, but now I know it's about rebirth." Sometimes, the worst heartbreaks are the ones that lead you back to yourself. After the applause, Daniel whispered in my ear, "You've come a long way, Helena." I smiled. "No," I said, "I've just finally come home." Later that night, as we walked by the river under a sky full of stars, I held Daniel's hand and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey, for the pain that shaped me, and for the love that didn't save me but found me after I saved myself. And as the wind brushed against my face, I whispered silently to the universe, "Thank you for breaking me, because now I know what it means to truly be whole." Years had passed since that night by the river. Life had changed, yet it had never been richer. Lucas was no longer a little boy clutching my hand nervously on his first day of school. He had grown into a confident, kind, and intelligent young man, proud of the woman who had shaped him. Daniel and I had built a life together based on honesty, patience, and love, the kind of love I had never known with Ricardo, the kind that healed instead of hurt. The art studio, once just a sanctuary for my own healing, had grown into a thriving gallery. I had started workshops, exhibitions, and community projects, all aimed at empowering women who had been through betrayal, loss, or trauma. My story, the story of heartbreak, discovery, and rebirth, had become a quiet beacon for others who were struggling in silence. One morning, while walking through the gallery, I paused before a painting I called Phoenix Rising. It was a self-portrait of sorts, a woman standing amidst flames, not defeated but luminous, powerful, free. The eyes in the painting reflected determination and peace, a reflection of the woman I had become. Lucas came up beside me, carrying his backpack. "Mom," he said, his voice brimming with excitement, "my teacher wants me to present your story to the class. She says it's inspiring." I smiled, kneeling down to meet his eyes. "Are you ready to tell them?" He nodded, his confidence making me beam. "Yeah, I want them to know that people can overcome anything." And he was right. That had become my life's lesson, not just for him, but for me and everyone who crossed my path. That evening, Daniel and I hosted a small gathering at the gallery. Friends, family, and students from my workshops came to celebrate the growth of the community we had built. As I looked around, I realized that the life I once thought was destroyed had simply transformed. Pain had been the catalyst, betrayal the teacher, and love, true, patient love, the reward. During a quiet moment, Daniel took my hand. "You've inspired so many people," he said softly, "including me." I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder. "It wasn't easy," I whispered, "but everything I went through, it was necessary. I wouldn't trade it, even the heartbreak, because it made me who I am today." That night, as I tucked Lucas into bed, he whispered, "Mom, I think you're the strongest person I know." I kissed his forehead, fighting back tears. "And you, my son, will always be stronger than you think. Never let anyone dim your light." Later, in the quiet of the night, Daniel and I walked through the empty gallery. The soft light illuminated my paintings, my past, my pain, my victories. I stopped before the final piece I had created, a painting called Home. It depicted a woman standing at the edge of a river, the sunset spilling gold across the water, a young boy by her side, and a figure approaching, a symbol of new love and hope. "This is what life is," I said softly, "a journey through loss, through fire, and into a place where you find yourself again, where you discover that the person you've always needed to love is you." Daniel nodded, squeezing my hand. "And now you can share that light with the world." I smiled, knowing he was right. The betrayal that once shattered my heart had given me clarity. The pain had forged resilience. And the love I had found afterward, patient, honest, true, had taught me the meaning of freedom. Years later, as I spoke at a women's empowerment conference, I recounted my story not as a tale of heartbreak, but as a testament to survival and rebirth. Every eye in the audience reflected understanding and hope. When I finished, the applause was not just for my words, but for the truth behind them, that even in the darkest moments, it is possible to rise, to reclaim your life, and to flourish. And in that moment, standing on the stage, I knew it completely. I had survived. I had risen. I had found myself. And that, more than anything else, was the life I had been searching for all along. Years had passed since the storm that had once consumed my life, but the echoes of that past still lingered, not as pain, but as lessons etched deep into my soul. By now, Lucas was thriving in school and had developed a quiet strength that reminded me so much of the woman I had become. Daniel, patient and unwavering, remained my partner, my friend, my anchor. And I had built a life of independence, creativity, and purpose that was entirely my own. Yet life, as I had learned, is never truly predictable. One crisp autumn morning, I was in my studio preparing for a new series of paintings inspired by resilience when a familiar envelope slid under the door. The handwriting startled me at first. It was Ricardo's. For a fleeting moment, a twinge of old curiosity or perhaps old fear crept into me. I hesitated, then picked it up. Inside was a letter, longer than the last one, filled with confessions and regret. He wrote about everything, the moments he had realized too late what he had lost, the ways in which guilt had haunted him, and the emptiness that followed Clara leaving him. But beyond the apologies, there was a strange request. He wanted closure, not reconciliation, just to understand how I had managed to rebuild my life so completely, how I had found strength where he had left destruction. I smiled faintly. For a moment, I almost laughed. It was surreal, the man who once betrayed me now seeking answers, almost like a student sitting in my classroom of life, hoping for a lesson. I wrote back carefully, not with anger, but with clarity. Ricardo, you wanted to know how I survived. I didn't survive because of you or despite you. I survived because I stopped waiting for someone else to save me. I found myself, my strength, my peace. That is the only lesson you could learn, and the only one you deserve. Goodbye. With that, I folded the letter and placed it in a box labeled the past. I knew it would never need to be opened again. Life moved on. The gallery grew, the workshops expanded, and I began mentoring women from all walks of life. Many of them had stories that mirrored mine: betrayal, loss, heartbreak. And in each of them, I saw fragments of my younger self, frightened, wounded, uncertain, and I helped them find what I had found: empowerment, purpose, and self-love. Then, one summer evening, something extraordinary happened. Lucas had won a national award for a science project, and we had traveled to the ceremony. Standing on the stage, watching my son beam with pride as they called his name, I realized something profound. Life had not only healed me but had multiplied its blessings. On the ride home, Daniel squeezed my hand gently. "You've built more than a life, Helena," he said. "You've built a legacy." I looked at him, smiling through tears. "Not just mine, Lucas, you, everyone who has walked through the gallery doors. We've all grown together." Back at the gallery, I spent the night painting under the soft glow of lamps, a new energy flowing through my work. I painted landscapes of triumph, portraits of resilience, and abstract representations of joy, colors vibrant, bold, unafraid. My art was no longer about processing pain, it was about celebrating life, about capturing the beauty that comes after survival. And yet, one night, a challenge appeared that I had not anticipated: an opportunity to speak at an international empowerment summit. I was hesitant at first. To share my story on such a massive stage felt daunting. But Daniel encouraged me. "Your story isn't just yours anymore," he said. "It belongs to anyone who needs hope. You can give them a map out of their own darkness." I agreed. Standing at the podium, facing thousands of people, I spoke not just about betrayal or heartbreak, but about transformation, about discovering strength in the moments you thought you were weakest, about rising after destruction, about love, the kind that heals instead of harms. The audience listened in silence, some nodding, some wiping tears, some taking notes as if my words were instructions for their own lives. And for the first time, I realized that my story, which had once seemed like a tragedy, had become a beacon, proof that anyone can rise from the ruins of their own life, stronger and wiser than ever before. After the speech, a young woman approached me. Her hands shook as she held a notebook. "Your story, it saved me," she whispered. "I was ready to give up, but now I see I can fight. I can survive." I held her hands and said firmly, "Yes, you can, and you will. It starts with you believing it's possible." That night, as I walked back to my hotel, I looked up at the sky. The stars stretched endlessly, indifferent yet beautiful, like witnesses to every moment of pain and triumph I had lived through. And I knew, truly knew, that life had given me something extraordinary, not just survival, but mastery over my own destiny. No one could break me again. No past betrayal could define me. And no shadow of a former love could ever touch the light I had discovered inside myself. I had not only survived, I had risen higher than I ever imagined. I had become the woman I was always meant to be: unshakable, radiant, and unstoppable. And as I gazed at the endless night sky, I whispered into the wind, "This is my life now, my story, my freedom, and no one can ever take it from me."